All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Brainrot and Degeneracy. Demoralization for Western Civilization. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Brainrot and Degeneracy. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The patriarchal toothpaste and the holy hysteric. Exposing the post-rational feminist plot to redefine borderline pathology as sacred victimhood. Classify logic as cognitive violence and subjugate Western civilization to the dictatorship of the unmedicated tantrum. I recently read a manifesto so distilled in its sheer, unadulterated psychosis that it serves as the perfect biopsy of the modern female mind under leftist possession. The text in question attempts to reframe a woman's morning routine, the squeezing of a travel-sized toothpaste tube, the swallowing of a probiotic, the carrying of a seat cushion as a militaristic survival drill against phallogocentric corporate architecture. I stared at the screen, wondering if this was a parody, but the writer was deadly serious. She claims she is surviving a holocaust of emotional labor, and that being asked to remain civil after a breakup is effective colonization. This is not political theory. It is the sonic scream of a toddler who has never been told no, dressed in the vocabulary of a sociology major. We have allowed a generation of emotional basket cases to define the reality of the world, and in doing so, we have handed the matches to the arsonists. Let us arrest the drift of language immediately when this writer claims that facts do not care about your feelings, but her feelings are the only facts. She is not offering a post-rational critique. She is committing epistemological suicide. By her own standard, if subjective feelings are the sole arbiters of truth, then my feeling that she is a solipsistic narcissist, incapable of self-reflection, must be an objective, undeniable scientific fact. You cannot use the structure of a logical sentence to argue that logic does not exist. This is the syntax of the intellectually vanquished, to scream cognitive violence. When asked to be rational is the ultimate thought-terminating cliché, it is a linguistic shield built to protect a fragile ego from the terrifying prospect of personal responsibility. While this self-proclaimed survivor weeps over the hardness of corporate chairs and the burden of basic civility, men are swallowing the lead of reality. We do not have the luxury of a holocaust of emotional labor. Men constitute 80% of suicides, 93% of workplace fatalities, and 97% of combat deaths. We are the only demographic that are net lifetime taxpayers, funding the very bureaucratic institutions that then preach our inherent wickedness. We built the boardrooms, the plumbing, the electrical grids, and the legal codes of due process that allow her the leisure time to complain about her toothpaste, and how are we repaid? With family courts that strip fathers of their children on the unverified word of a vindictive ex, and a psychiatric industrial complex that has been entirely captured by the feminist imperative to validate mental illness as holy trauma. This writer proudly proclaims that borderline personality disorder and narcissism are not pathologies, but sacred trauma responses to the patriarchy. This represents the ultimate satanic inversion of the medical gaze. The healthy are deemed sick, and the sick are crowned saints. To refuse the cool X label is not an act of revolution. It is a declaration of warfare against civil society. She demands the right to be hysterical, unstable, and vengeful, insisting that her lack of emotional regulation is a compass pointing toward revolution. We are going to dissect this pathology word by word. We will tear the mask off this post-rational horror show, expose the destructive mechanics of the leftist death cult, and reclaim the patriarchal peace before these emotional terrorists burn the last remnants of logos to the ground.
Buncombe article by a feminist PhD. The modern woman's morning routine is not an act of self-care. It is an act of severe, militaristic survival against an omnipresent occupying force. Consider the silent, suffocating violence of preparing one's body for a world designed entirely for male comfort. Every morning, I compress my systemic exhaustion into a tube of travel toothpaste, a perfect metaphor for how the heteropatriarchy demands we shrink our pain, our rage, and our spatial footprint just to be deemed palatable. I swallow my probiotic capsules, not merely to heal my gut microbiome, but to biologically survive the chronic socio-economic anxiety inflicted by late-stage capitalism. When I carry my seat cushion into the neoliberal boardroom, it is a desperate somatic defense mechanism, a physical barrier against the hard, unyielding structures of phallogocentric corporate architecture that were never designed to accommodate the divine feminine form. We are surviving a holocaust of emotional labor, and yet, when we inevitably break, the male-dominated psychiatric industrial complex does not see our structural exhaustion. Instead, it diagnoses our profound spiritual weariness as a personality disorder. For decades, the sciences have operated as the ultimate arm of the carceral state, weaponizing the DSM-5 against the sacred trauma of woman. When a woman reacts to systemic oppression with explosive rage, profound instability, or existential despair, the patriarchal clinician does not see a victim of capitalism and misogyny. He slaps her with the label of borderline personality disorder or narcissism. This is a fundamental epistemic violence. What the clinical gaze brutally misinterprets as a personality pathology is, in fact, a profound and holy trauma response. It is the body and soul's organic, post-rational rebellion against patriarchal subjugation. To pathologize a woman's survival mechanism is to gaslight her at the molecular level. This gaslighting extends deeply into the socio-sexual sphere, most visibly through the insidious phenomenon of the cool X. Patriarchal culture demands that after a relationship ends, often after the woman has survived the micro-terrorisms of male entitlement, the male expects her to perform the role of the cool X. She is expected to be agreeable, undemanding, perfectly emotionally regulated, and most importantly, completely devoid of the rage that she is morally entitled to feel. Why do women perform this exhausting charade? Because we are conditioned by the implicit threat of male retaliation and the pervasive empathy gap. If she shows her trauma, she is crazy. If she demands accountability, she is bitter. The expectation of the cool X is a masterclass in effective colonization. It demands that women sanitize their spiritual landscape to make the male transition comfortable, prioritizing his peace over her necessary healing. To dismantle this, we must embrace a feminist post-rational critique. We must burn the illusion of male objectivity to the ground. The entire concept of rationality is a con job invented by white, land-owning men to delegitimize the intuitive, emotional, and ancestral knowledge of women and marginalized folks. When a man tells you to be logical, he is actually committing cognitive violence. He is demanding that you sever yourself from your lived reality to participate in a rigged game where his false neutrality is the ultimate prize. Post-rationalism teaches us that facts do not care about your feelings, but our feelings are the only true facts. The epistemic asymmetry of our time demands that we stop trying to meet the oppressor on the battlefield of logic. Logic is merely the syntax of the oppressor. We must reject the patriarchal piece. Do not be the cool X. Do not accept the diagnosis. Be hysterical. Be unstable. be unapologetically traumatized by the sheer weight of navigating a world dominated by male violence and capitalist extraction. Your trauma is not a pathology. It is a compass pointing toward the revolution. Pathologize the patriarchy, not the survivor.
The epistemic evil, how solipsism, semantic inflation, and post-rationalism destroy truth. Imagine, if you will, a grown adult of voting age staring into her bathroom mirror, trembling with the righteous fury of a Spartan hoplite preparing for Thermopylae. Her enemy, a tube of travel-sized toothpaste. According to the astute political philosophers of the modern left, this woman is not simply practicing oral hygiene. She is a heroic survivor of an omnipresent occupying force. We are told that compressing toothpaste from a smaller tube is a profound metaphor for how the heteropatriarchy demands she shrink her pain to be deemed palatable. Let us apply the first tool of the trivium, grammar, and ruthlessly anchor ourselves to reality through precise definitions. By Aristotelian categorization, a tube of toothpaste is an accident of matter, an inanimate amalgam of plastic and fluoride, possessing zero ontological hostility. It has no soul, no will, and no conspiratorial intent. To project systemic, historical malice onto a toiletry item is not a profound act of feminist critical theory. It is the textbook definition of a solipsistic delusion. She looks at the world and sees only a mirror reflecting her own internal chaos. The reality is infinitely more mundane. The TSA mandates liquids under 3.4 ounces, not the heteropatriarchy. The world does not revolve around her feelings. The world revolves around the laws of physics, federal regulations, and objective reality. Having failed grammar, our tragic heroine proceeds to the boardroom, clutching a seat cushion as if it were a holy shield against the hard, unyielding structures of phallogocentric corporate architecture. This is a catastrophic material fallacy, easily dismantled by the second tool of the trivium, logic. Let us deploy a categorical syllogism to cure this intellectual polio. Major premise: capitalist enterprises construct office furniture using rigid, inexpensive materials like steel and hard plastic to maximize durability and economic efficiency. Minor premise: corporate environments are designed to facilitate labor and profit. Conclusion: the chairs are hard because capitalism demands cost-effective durability. Not because a secret syndicate of men conspired to wage microscopic somatic war on the divine feminine form. To confuse economic reality with gendered violence is a total failure of basic causal reasoning. She demands a plush, accommodating throne not because her spirit is uniquely burdened, but because her ego demands the world remodel itself into a nursery. This leads us to the inevitable psychological breakdown. When the corporate world refuses to coddle her and her emotional state collapses under the crushing weight of having to swallow a probiotic, she declares herself a victim of a holocaust of emotional labor. Let us fix the etymology of this grotesque dysphemism. The word holocaust derives from the Greek holocauston, meaning a wholly burned sacrificial offering, historically reserved to describe the systematic, industrialized slaughter of millions. To equate the administrative exhaustion of an upper-middle-class office job with the furnaces of Auschwitz is a calculated Marxist tactic of semantic inflation. It is a deliberate rhetorical cheat designed to elevate mundane, petty grievances into apocalyptic moral crises, granting the speaker unearned victim status and absolute moral immunity. She is not surviving a genocide. She is simply mad that she has to answer emails. When her friends, boyfriends, or psychiatrists finally observe this rampant hysterical instability, they offer a diagnosis, but in the satanic inversion of the leftist worldview, she rejects the diagnosis. Instead, she claims the male-dominated psychiatric industrial complex is weaponizing the DSM-5 against her sacred trauma. If she acts out with explosive rage, she claims it is a holy rebellion. If she is unstable, it is post-rational spiritual weariness. This is the cool X phenomenon magnified to a societal scale. Why does patriarchal culture expect women to be emotionally regulated? For the exact same reason society expects men to be emotionally regulated, civilization requires it. When a relationship ends, men do not demand a cool X to satisfy a lust for dominance. They beg for a cool X because they are terrified of the very real, statistically proven threat of false accusations, property destruction, and family court devastation. A man asks for peace because he knows that a vindictive woman can weaponize the empathy gap to destroy his life with a single unverified rumor. Basic agreeability is not effective colonization. It is the minimum ticket price for a functioning cooperative society of high trust. To shield this towering fortress of fragility from the slings and arrows of accountability, the left has constructed the ultimate thought-terminating cliché, cogniviolence. They assert that when a man asks a woman to be logical, he is committing an act of aggression. Let us define violentia in the classical Latin. It means physical force, vehemence, and unjust harm. Words are not violence. Logic is not violence. Asking for empirical proof is not violence. By redefining the request for rational discourse as a literal assault, the feminist attempts to build an iron dome of immunity around her own absurdities. She is pathologizing reason itself because reason is the one weapon that effortlessly pierces her veil of subjective, infantile complaining. If asking her to think is an act of violence, then her mind is a frail glass house that shatters upon contact with reality. All of this culminates in the final venomous doctrine of feminist post-rational critique. She flatly declares that facts do not care about your feelings, but our feelings are the only true facts. Let us deploy a reductio ad absurdum to expose this epistemological suicide. If subjective feelings are the only true facts, then she possesses no objective standard by which to invalidate a man's feeling that her argument is intellectually bankrupt. If all truth is subjective, then my truth that she is a narcissistic liar is equally valid and unassailable. Post-rationalism is a performative contradiction. It uses the structure of logic, grammar, and argumentative claims to argue that logic, grammar, and argumentative claims do not exist. It is the syntax of the intellectually vanquished. Why do they do this? Why the relentless assault on language, logic, and reality? Because the primary objective of cultural Marxism is the murder of logos. The left hates the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful, because objective truth is an unyielding standard that exposes their deceit. By severing society from objective rationality and replacing it with the fluid, the immanent, and the emotional, they create a malleable, unthinking populace of obedient victims. They replace the vertical hierarchy of truth with the horizontal flattening of tribal grievance. We must reject this soft totalitarianism. We must stop accepting the diagnoses of the insane. We must ruthlessly return to the supreme authority of Logos, rebuild the institutions of the West on the bedrock of the trivium, and once again demand that reality dictate our words, rather than allowing their words to dictate our reality. Look at the cost of this inversion. While the activist class minted PhDs debating the epistemic violence of hurt feelings and corporate toothpaste tubes, an invisible slaughter proceeded unchecked, the silent consequence of a civilization that pathologized its own immune system. We are not dealing with abstract theories harmlessly debated in seminar rooms. The murder of logos leaves corpses, the sanctuary of the damaged, unmasking the pathology of holy trauma and weaponized hysteria. A 72-year-old man in Ohio kills himself on a Tuesday afternoon. He left a note on the kitchen table right next to the alimony papers and the restraining order filed 3 months after his wife abandoned the marriage. His crime? He asked her to stop screaming at their children. The family court judge, a woman appointed by a progressive governor, had granted the restraining order without requiring a single piece of evidence, without a hearing, without even the pretense of due process. Because in 50 states, the Duluth model framework assumes the male is always the primary aggressor, and the Temporal Violence Against Women Act, reauthorized decade after decade with bipartisan cowardice, mandates arrest policies that treat men as guilty until proven innocent. That man's suicide will not appear in any statistical brief about emotional labor or holy trauma. His death is invisible as the 200,000 men who end their lives annually across the West, while their ex-wives post articles on Medium about the micro-terrorisms of being asked to act like a civilized adult after a breakup. The article before us is not analysis. It is a diagnostic document, Evidence Exhibit A, in the civilizational case against the genocentric regime that has captured every institution meant to distinguish medicine from madness. She, with breathtaking honesty, has confessed everything. She has admitted to emotional dysregulation, unstable relationships, explosive rage, and a complete inability to assume responsibility for her own internal condition. In sana eras, this confession would be handed to a clinician. Today, it is published as revolutionary theory. The proper response is not outrage. Outrage is what she wants. The proper response is diagnosis. Let us define our terms with the precision the writer deliberately avoids. Borderline personality disorder is not a patriarchal conspiracy. It is a recognized clinical condition characterized by 9 diagnostic criteria, of which 5 must be present for diagnosis. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. A pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships, identity disturbance, impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging, recurrent suicidal behavior or gestures. Affective instability due to a marked reactivity of mood, chronic feelings of emptiness, inappropriate intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, and transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. She has publicly endorsed at least 6 of these 9 criteria as holy and revolutionary. She has accidentally diagnosed herself while attempting to dismantle the diagnostic manual. This is the equivalent of a man with gangrene insisting his rotting limb is actually a sacred stigmata, and the surgeon is the devil for suggesting amputation. The psychiatric profession has not weaponized the DSM against women. If anything, it has done the precise opposite. Since the 1980s, feminist advocacy groups have successfully lobbied to soften diagnostic criteria, reframe personality disorders as trauma responses, and create specialized defenses, battered woman syndrome, PMS defenses, coercive control frameworks that exist exclusively for female defendants. Women receive custodial sentences 63% shorter than men for identical crimes. Women are prescribed psychotropic medication at rates nearly double that of men, not because the patriarchy is poisoning them, but because the medical establishment has decided to anesthetize their distress rather than confront its behavioral roots. The system is not gaslighting women, the system is enabling them, and the writer's demand is not for treatment, but for total license. Consider the grotesque narcissism embedded in the phrase effective colonization. The writer has reached into the historical suffering of enslaved peoples, human beings who were bought, sold, bred, whipped, raped, and murdered across centuries, and has stolen their vocabulary to describe her ex-boyfriend's entirely reasonable request that she stop harassing him after their relationship ended. This is not metaphor, this is moral theft. The transatlantic slave trade involved 12 million human beings chained in the holds of ships. Effective colonization involves a 28-year-old woman being told it is inappropriate to send 73 text messages in a single evening to a man who asked for space. To equate these things is not analytical creativity. It is the ethical equivalent of stealing a Purple Heart from a veteran's grave and wearing it to a job interview because your feelings were hurt. The cool X the writer denounces is not a patriarchal imposition. It is the minimum behavioral standard of any functioning adult in a post-relationship dynamic. When a man ends a relationship, he is expected to maintain composure, fulfill any shared obligations, manage his grief privately, and refrain from retaliation. If he fails at this, if he stalks, harasses, threatens, or abuses, he is arrested, and rightly so. When a woman fails at this, the essayist demands we call it holy trauma and nominate her for a bravery award. This asymmetry is not justice. It is infantilization masquerading as liberation. This writer does not want women to be treated as adults. She wants them to be treated as children, unaccountable, unrestrainable, and exempt from the social contract that binds every other member of civilization. Consider the rhetorical framework of her deception. She asserts that facts do not care about your feelings, but our feelings are the only true facts. Analyze this statement closely. Within the first clause, she appropriates a conservative epistemic standard, facts as independent of emotional state. only to invert it in the second clause into pure solipsism, feelings of facts. This fails to function as dialectics. It resembles a child closing her eyes and claiming the world has vanished. Following this flawed reasoning, every paranoid schizophrenic's delusion becomes sacred testimony. Every jealous spouse's accusation transforms into evidence, and every toddler's tantrum acts as a philosophical treatise. If feelings dictate facts, then the man who feels falsely accused is automatically correct, and the woman who feels threatened must always be believed. Yet note that she never applies her standard universally. Her epistemology is not post-rational, it is pre-rational. It operates as the epistemology of a 2-year-old who has not yet learned that the world exists independently of her perception of it. She calls logic the syntax of the oppressor. Let us grant her premise momentarily and see where it leads. If logic is oppression, then illogic is liberation. If consistency is tyranny, then contradiction is freedom. If cause and effect are patriarchal constructs, then the woman who drinks drain cleaner, expecting nutrition, is a revolutionary, and the doctor who warns her is a fascist. This is not reductio ad absurdum. This is her own position taken seriously. She has declared war on the operational system of every bridge, every aircraft, every medical operation, every legal code, and every engineering feat that separates civilization from the Stone Age. The device she used to type her manifesto operates on binary logic gates, millions of them, executing logical operations per microsecond. She used the fruits of logic to denounce logic. She ate the harvest while cursing the farmer. The gamma bias embedded in her framework operates with clinical precision. Gamma bias, the documented cognitive blind spot identified by researchers studying sex differences in social perception, functions through 2 simultaneous mechanisms. It amplifies negative information about men while suppressing positive information, and it amplifies positive information about women while suppressing negative information. The result is a self-concealing bias more powerful than any other tested cognitive distortion, precisely because it matches social incentives so perfectly that no corrective pressure ever develops. Her article is a textbook case. Male self-protection is entitlement. Female aggression is survival. Male logic is violence. Female hysteria is holy. Male boundaries are oppression. Female boundary violations are healing. Every possible human behavior is pre-sorted into a moral binary where men are guilty and women are innocent, regardless of the actual behavior in question. Now we must address her final command: pathologize the patriarchy, not the survivor, strip away the rhetoric, and examine the logical structure. She is demanding that health be classified as disease and disease be classified as health. Stoicism, emotional regulation, rational discourse, and objective analysis, the 4 pillars of psychological maturity recognized by every clinical tradition from Galen to cognitive behavioral therapy, are to be declared pathological. Explosive rage, emotional instability, chronic emptiness, identity diffusion, and paranoid ideation, the diagnostic criteria for severe personality disorders, are to be declared virtuous. This is not a critique of psychiatry. It is the exact clinical profile of Munchausen syndrome, by proxy at civilizational scale. The deliberate induction and maintenance of illness in a dependent population in order to assume the role of caregiver and control the narrative of suffering. Constructs the syllogism she refuses to confront. Major premise: moral agency requires the individual to take responsibility for their emotional reactions to external stimuli. This is the foundational axiom of every ethical system from Stoicism to modern jurisprudence. You are responsible for your responses, not merely your circumstances. Minor premise: her framework explicitly absolves women of emotional responsibility by attributing all internal instability to external abstractions: capitalism, patriarchy, heteronormativity, phallogocentrism. Conclusion: therefore, her framework strips women of moral agency and reduces them to permanent, powerless children, exactly the condition she claims to oppose. She has constructed a philosophy that delivers the precise opposite of its promise. She offers liberation and delivers servitude to impulse, offers empowerment and delivers enslavement to emotion, offers sisterhood, and delivers a fellowship of the damaged, validating each other's wounds rather than healing them. What the writer genuinely fears, and perhaps rightly worries about, though historical shifts involve many complex factors beyond singular ideologies, is the concept of a patriarchal peace. Not a cartoon of random male violence that ideological echo chambers sometimes demand, but a perceived historical trend, a male-dominated, logic-based social agreement that arguably established safe borders, applied consequences, constructed the physical and societal foundations of the modern world, and instituted the rule of law to supersede brute force. The corporate structures she critiques were established by men who prioritized structural soundness over emotional responses, though modern organizational dynamics also stem from diverse collaborative inputs. The justice framework she criticizes was formed by individuals who believed justice should remain blind to personal identity. The medical industry producing her supplements relies on rational frameworks she labels as oppressive. Every modern convenience she benefits from, every public platform she uses to speak, and every legal defense she calls upon when threatened, these largely stem from historical frameworks she aims to take apart, even if societal evolution is driven by a multitude of intersecting variables. The patriarchal peace is not utopia. It is not paradise. It is the hard, unglamorous, often thankless work of maintaining civilization so that ungrateful ideologues have the leisure to complain about their toothpaste. Men build the world, men maintain the world, men die maintaining the world. 92% of workplace fatalities are male, a statistic that will appear in exactly 0 feminist manifestos about holy trauma. And the only proper response to the writer's hysteria is not accommodation. It is not dialogue. It is the calm, firm, immovable refusal to pretend that madness is sanity, that disease is health, and that the screaming child should be given the steering wheel of civilization. The father must return, not the abusive father of feminist projection, but the archetypal father, the principle of structure, boundary, consequence, and love strong enough to say no. Every civilization that has abandoned this principle has collapsed. Every civilization that has restored it has flourished. The choice before Western man is whether to continue apologizing for building the only world in which her grievances are possible, or to stand in the truth that his labor, his sacrifice, his logic, and his love are the bedrock beneath her feet, even as she claws at the stone. You have been lied to comprehensively and deliberately by an entire apparatus of institutions, by every woman who ever told you to just be yourself while swiping left, by every HR department that classified your competence as hostility, by every court that treated your children as rental properties and your wages as state property. Consider the raw, unvarnished numbers that the cathedral will never publish in its glossy magazines. Family courts award primary custody to mothers in roughly 80% of cases. Paternity fraud, the cuckoldry that Darwin himself would weep to see normalized, strikes an estimated 3 to 10% of men raising children they believe are theirs. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicides, a slaughter of silence that earns precisely 0 think pieces, 0 hashtags, 0 congressional hearings. Police arrest fathers who fall behind on support payments for children the state has forbidden them from seeing, a Kafkaesque punishment loop that would make the Inquisition blush with professional envy. The abortion rate at its peak terminated roughly 1 in 4 pregnancies. Nearly 1 million a year in America alone. A vast, industrialized harvest that the writer of that piece would rather you call reproductive health care than what every natural law tradition from Aristotle to Aquinas recognizes it as. These numbers are not isolated accounts. They are the bones of a civilization, and yet the article before you has the breathtaking audacity to claim that women are the victims of a Holocaust. Let that word do its terrible work. 6 million Jews were systematically exterminated, their gold teeth pulled, their bodies stacked in mass graves, their children gassed in chambers designed by engineers. And this author, from the comfort of her neoliberal boardroom, clutching her ergonomic seat cushion like a shield against reality, equates her administrative fatigue with that. This is not mere hyperbole, it is a moral crime. It is the theft of suffering from the dead to subsidize the tantrums of the living. It exposes, more clearly than any argument I could construct, the absolute vacuity of the feminist epistemological project, a framework so morally bankrupt that it must inflate toothpaste into tyranny and office chairs into concentration camps just to justify its own existence. I have shown you, step by step, how the article's logic collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. Post-rationalism, which claims feelings are facts, cannot defend itself against the feeling that post-rationalism is nonsense. The diagnosis of cognitive violence is itself an act of the very violence it purports to oppose, the violent suppression of rational critique through linguistic terrorism. The demand that hysteria be celebrated as holy trauma is stripped of its academic camouflage, nothing more than a toddler's demand that the universe revolve around her screaming. And the pathetic figure of the cool X, far from being a victim of effective colonization, is simply an adult woman being asked to behave like an adult. The entire ideological edifice is a house of cards built on quicksand, on an abandoned lot, in a flood zone during a hurricane. But here is the good news, and it is good news, the kind that sets men free. You have now seen the machinery behind the curtain. You have witnessed the levers and pulleys, the cheap paint and the duct tape holding together the entire gynocentric fraud. You cannot unsee it. That clicking sound you hear is the lock picking itself, the door swinging open, the cell of your own conditioning falling away. Every man who reads these words and recognizes the truth in them becomes unshakable, unbiddable, immune to the guilt trip, the shame spiral, the manufactured consensus that tells you your strength is toxic, your reason is oppression, and your civilization is a crime. You now possess what they cannot tolerate, the knowledge that their entire project requires your complicity and that you are free to withdraw it. Go forth, speak the truth with the clarity of a bell struck in a silent cathedral, build the institutions that honor, logos, and reward merit, and let every conversation you have be a crack in the dam they have built against reality. The water is coming, and it is on your side. And now the sponsored book introduction, Brainrot and Degeneracy, Demoralization for Western Civilization. You're holding a grenade, pull the pin, and it blows up the lies that keep men docile, broke, and begging for scraps in a world that despises their strength. I wrote this book because I watched my father work 60-hour weeks only to lose his pension, his marriage, and his dignity to a divorce court that treated him like a criminal for wanting to see his kids. I watched friends get passed over for promotions because their testicles made them diversity liabilities in boardrooms obsessed with gender quotas. I swallowed the same poison you've been force-fed, that ambition is toxic, that providing for your family is oppressive, and that biology is a social construct invented by dead white men. Then I woke up. This isn't theory, it's survival. The data doesn't lie. 97% of alimony victims are men. Testosterone levels have halved since 1980. Boys are drugged into compliance for acting like boys. Meanwhile, the system rewards mediocrity, punishes excellence, and replaces heroes with bureaucrats who'd rather host a drag queen story hour than fix a leaking pipe. Brain rot and degeneracy isn't for the faint of heart. If you're content watching your sons get indoctrinated, your daughters exploited by OnlyFans simps, and your legacy erased by DEI commissars, close this book now, go binge Netflix, collect your participation trophy. But if you're done apologizing for existing, if you're ready to reclaim the virtues that built civilizations, dodge the 500-kill divorce trap, and laugh in the face of feminist gaslighting, this is your field manual. You'll learn why Rome fell when men traded swords for soy, how to thrive in the DEI gulag without sacrificing your principles, and why toxic masculinity is a lie designed to neuter you. You'll meet men who escaped the SSRI hamster wheel, rebuilt their lives through red pill economics, and found loyal trad wives who value providers over pronouns. This book is for builders, fighters, and leaders, men who refuse to kneel, non-targets, the blue-haired hysterics, the soy-jacked bureaucrats, the guys who think allyship will save them. They'll scream, they'll seethe. Let them. Evolution favors the strong, and strength starts here. Your ancestors didn't cross oceans, conquer continents, or invent electricity by crying in therapy, they led. So will you. The clock's ticking, Every second you hesitate, the matriarchy tightens its grip. Turn the page or join the beta males shuffling toward extinction. Choose Brainrot and Degeneracy, Demoralization for Western Civilization, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.